What's up, folks? Casual Dad slash Trogdor here, and I want to take a minute to talk about something that I've wanted to talk about for a while, and that is kind of the fundamentals of what makes a good X-Wing squad list. Now, I already did a video on how to build lists, just the points into them, and talked a little bit more about how to actually put the pieces together, but I want to talk a little bit more about the concept of what makes it good. Obviously, this is going to be geared towards competitive players or players who want to become competitive, but there's going to be a lot of value for even kitchen table players too, because kind of understanding how to make something good gives you sort of the opportunity to be more creative, to make things your own, and is also a really good way to get everyone on the same page, a nice baseline, so that if you're playing kitchen table with some buddies, you're all kind of on an even footing, so you have even games. Because of course everyone knows close games are better, right? So let's just start with this. And the whole point of this is all of the fundamentals of the game changes. We get new upgrades, we get new ships, we get different rules changes, who knows. So I'm going to stick to concepts that hopefully will be general enough to apply to whatever state the game is when you're watching this, but also hopefully be specific enough that they'll be helpful right now. So at the moment we're in X-Wing 2.5, Atomic Mass Games' kind of rules revision, and we've got 4 scenarios. 2 of the 4 scenarios have 5 objectives, and 1 scenario has 3 objectives, and then the third has 1, but it's more of an actual fight, right? So the reason I mentioned that is when we're talking about what makes a list good. What is good? And good is it has a reasonable chance to win any mission that happens to be available at the time, beat any other list in a fight, and give you at least a fighting chance of winning any individual game. That's kind of the priorities we're talking about here. So there are 3 major considerations to kind of go through there. Number 1 is going to be your ship count. Number 1, ship count. And that's the number of ships you have physically on the table. You look back to 1.0, you look at 2.0, you look at 2.5, all of the versions of the game, one of the most defining pieces of the meta is the number of ships on the board. Now going back to 1.0, it was possible to supercharge ships with upgrades, so the minimum squad of 2 ships actually was quite strong back in the day. But also it was very challenging to put enough chassis on the board to beat those big chonkers too. So overall list sizes were somewhere between 2 and 4, maybe 5, rarely above that. And then in 2.0, it ramped up a little bit, right? With the addition of separatists and some ships becoming extremely cheap and just kind of generally being able to spam generics, especially things like TIE fighters, you did see list sizes creep up. And I believe the average then was about 4 to 5, I think, was sort of the general list size. Of course, with your droid swarms going up to 8, and some of your other lists going down to 3, which was the minimum at the time. I think. Check me on that. It might have been 2, but I think it was 3. Anyway, it was much more rare in 2.0 to have 2 ship lists, or the minimum squad size list. They were usually bigger, in large part because the ceiling went up. So there's always that push and pull between the minimum and the maximum, where the minimum has to be at a healthy level where it can compete with the max, and the maximum has to be either enough ships or good enough that it can actually give you value out of more bodies, right? And that actually brings us back to 2.5, where we are right now. The 8-ship lists are really struggling, especially droids. We may talk about that someday. But the thing is that kind of your sweet spot of value in terms of ship count right now tends to be between 5 and 7. 8 is a little bit too many. Very few factions can put that many on the board. 7 is where you really start sort of taking hits, where you're shaving off corners and shaving off points to actually put that many ships on the table, and it's taking away your overall effectiveness. Then you get to 5, and 5 is a really nice sweet spot where you can play with a lot of different points values within the 20, and then if you dip into 4, you can, but then, like I mentioned in the beginning, there are 5 objective scenarios, and one of the key pieces is you want, ideally, to have enough bodies on the board that you can interact in every single objective every single turn, should that come up. And the objectives are, there's a action-based one, where your ships have to perform an action to flip a button on or off. There's a physical moving them, where your ships have to actually use an action to pick up one of these and then carry it around the board without dying. And then there's another one that's just flat area control. Now, the area control does give you a bit of an advantage to larger ships, so you can have a smaller list if some of them are larger or medium base, because they have more of an advantage in that area control, which also applies to chance engagement, the fighty one. But, so that's ship count. That was number 1. Number 2, the second biggest priority, is attack dice. Now, in the game, every single ship has an attack value and a defense value, your red dice and your green dice, and of the two, red dice are a little bit more reliable, more consistent. You're more likely to roll hits than you are to roll evades. So on balance, just like really simplifying the statistics here, your red dice are more powerful than your green dice. To a point, of course. So, sorry about that, bump in the table. Yes, so you want to prioritize having as many effective offensive pieces as possible. And just the flat, easiest way to measure that is you want all of your ships to have a minimum of 3 red attack dice. Yeah, and that's a good start. So you're looking at, if you were to take just an absolute baseline, well, actually, hang on. So that's point number 2, is your offense. And it's both the number of red dice you have, the number of red dice you have per ship, the number of shots you have, and then also the... keep losing. Anyway, we'll get back to that. Oh, and the mods, of course. So you don't just want raw red dice. You want them also modded as best as possible, too. So you want good actions, you want good linked actions, so that your ships can kind of get as much as they can out of those offensive dice, right? And when I talk about the offensive dice, it doesn't have to just be the printed value. You could take, for example, a Y-wing that has 2 attack dice, but then put on a turret and or missiles or torpedoes. I don't think any of them have cannons. No, I don't think they have cannons. But there are ways you can spend your upgrade points to make those ships more reliably offensive than they are on the cardboard. So that's something to look out for too. Now the third and final piece is synergy. And I hate to use that word, it's a random buzzword. But the thing is that once you take your fundamentals, your number of ships, and then you take your raw attack value, once you've kind of taken those 2 pieces into account, that's you need enough offense to win the game, you need enough ships to survive and to actually compete on objectives and control space on the board. And then last, you want to make sure that your ships will work together, or that the ships are independent enough where they don't have to work together, right? So kind of an ideal baseline here is if you want to think about the most basic, potentially successful list in X-Wing right now is 5 X-Wings. That's sort of your baseline. And that's not only a good baseline based on the 3 criteria I just outlined, but also just because it is the standard bearer of the game. It is the X-Wing. And the most common example of that you're going to see is going to be Resistance X-Wings. Because right now 5 Resistance X-Wings are actually a very common list at competitive tournaments as well. You see them quite a bit. It's something that people have to be able to deal with. Now there are a couple things that push those ahead. They do have some synergy where they actually have abilities that buff each other. You're looking especially, I believe, Temin has an ability that lets you do your... Oh, what does he do? I should know this. He lets you use your S-foils to move, because you've got the flippy flappy wings that give you a benefit to your actions and movement if you keep them closed at the cost of offense. But then what Temin does is he lets you do that for movement and then flip them up to be more offensive as well. Super strong ability, because it gives you great mobility out of ships that can be a little bit clunky, but also gives you additional offense as well. So awesome. But yeah, and then another piece they have is they have upgrade slots for things like HLC, heavy laser cannons, which takes their base red dice from 3 to 4 in Bullseye. So it gives them a whole lot of bursty offense as well. And that's really important because you're bumping your offense, because each of those ships only has 2 green dice. And while I said that red dice are more valuable than green dice, that's 1-to-1. So 3 red dice may not be better than 2 green dice. So that's where you get that balance between offense and defense, right? And those X-Wings are good. These are the T-70 Resistance X-Wings, but they are somewhat outshone by some of the more tuned lists. So that's your baseline you're starting at. You've got 5 ships that are 4 points each that all have at least 3 attack dice printed on their base. So that's really good. And a couple other things about that too is that also is what's called it's not a points fortress, it's evenly spreading out your points. Now if you have a bunch of ships and one of them is fragile and more expensive, most opponents are going to go for that immediately as a weak point, be like, if I kill that, I get enough points to really get an edge. Or if it's something that is fewer points but it's very easy to kill, such as like a resistance pod that isn't Finn, then that's something that's somewhat easy to kill but doesn't net you very many points. So for you, if it's taken out, no hard feelings, no big deal. Whereas for your opponent, if it's taken out, they get minimal benefit, right? And so if all of your ships are the same cost, that kind of forces them to think like, okay, which do I shoot at first? And a big chunk of having your lists be very effective is not having consistent weak points, not only forcing your opponent to make bad decisions, but also making sure that they don't have any obvious good decisions too. So these are kind of the key points here, some of the big pieces to lay out. I'm actually going to look at some individual lists and maybe do a little list building here to kind of talk about this further. Next up, we have our list builder. This is YASB 2.0. I just talked about the resistance list, but being a scum player at heart, we're going to go ahead and switch to scum. I'm going to build just a baseline 5-ship list and then kind of show you how I can shave this around a little bit. So I talk often about how I don't think Fang Fighters are very good, but they're still going to be our baseline here. And then we'll throw in the Rogues, which I think the Rogues are a phenomenal chassis. Huge, huge value for the cost. And part of that is both the upgrade points they offer, they have quite a few, plus the pilot abilities they have, and then also just the slots they have too. And their action bar is quite good. And then also their stats are quite good too. They've got 7 hit points there. So they don't have a ton of defense, they don't have a ton of offense, but you can fix that with kind of your standard consistent piece here is going to be your synced laser cannons. And we're going to go ahead and put that on both of them. And now all of a sudden you have 5 ships for 20 points total. You've got 5 ships, all of them are 4 points. There is no real obvious target. Let's see here, I'm not going to do a tour. Yeah. There's no real obvious target because any one of these killed gives the same amount of points back, and all of them have a native 3-die gun. They will throw 3 dice at least if they're shooting stuff in the full arc. So this is just kind of a quick way to look at this and kind of think of this is your baseline, right? This is where you start. You get 5 ships on the board, you put them all roughly the same cost, and then you kind of make them so they're very consistent pieces that have good offense, have decent defense, and can just compete on the board. Now you can kit these out however you want, honestly. I'm not going to necessarily go into individual upgrades. The biggest thing I wanted to talk about is just kind of those fundamentals of what make a list good, because the upgrades are going to change. The one exception, of course, is I wanted to show that you could make the Rogues that 3 attack die ship base, because that's one of the things I made key. However, this is the point where you can fine tune. So if you take your standard 5 4-point ships, the list is fine. It will do well, it will perform consistently. But you can min-max this. So you can kind of dial some things down to dial some things up. So one of the more common pieces you could do here is say take one of these, you could take every single one of these ships and shave it down to 3 points, and then you have a slot for another 5-point ship. So then your ship count goes from 5 to 6, and you have a 5-point power piece that you can throw in here. So it is a 5-point piece. That's an unfortunate example because the 5-point is not a very strong slot in Scum. So go ahead and throw Manaru, and then we'll shave all of these down to 3-point ships, is something you could do. Of course, I'm not actually going to do that because it would take a while to run through all of them. I just kind of wanted to talk through the concept there. Or you can shave any one of these down to a 3-point. So let's see, we will grab one of the Y-wings. We'll say our Lees, and then we can drop one of these guys. There we go. Come on, I'm bumping. So I changed the 4-point to 3-point. I have 1 point left. So I can upgrade any of my 4s to a 5. So instead of CAD, I could go to Old Terok, for example, or I could swap that out for Manaru to have a little bit more hit points on there for something very effective. I just wanted to highlight how you can tinker with the points here too. A more common change would be to switch a couple of these to 3-point ships. So another thing you're going to look for within each individual faction is that extra efficiency. So you want, you want to make sure that you're spending your points in a way that is efficient, so that the pieces you put on the board will do what you need them to, even if it's just a 2-point ship to grab objectives. And then we'll also give you kind of more utilities here. So here I can swap Old Terok up to Fenrau. Now I don't believe in Fenrau, but a lot of really, really effective players do. So Fenrau he's got a high initiative, so he does move last, so you know where everything is when you move, and then he can use his reposition actions, like his focus, his boost, and his barrel roll, to actually get in a final position that you know is either safe or know is best for his offense or is best for his defensive abilities. So this is, but the big point about him is he's a 6-point ship. So you can shave 2 of your 4s down to 3s to get a 6, or you could shave your other 2 4s down to 3s as well and make this an 8 if you really wanted to. Just to kind of talk about that a little bit. But of course these B-wings have even less defense. They've got 1 defense and 2 forward attack dice, so you pretty much have to load them up with ordnance. And then you get into some unfortunate compromises here too, because to fire secondary weapons like missiles or torpedoes, you usually have to take an action to make that weapon work. So weapons and torpedoes, you have to have a target lock. If you target lock, you don't have an additional action. So if you do something like pick up a crate or flip a button or you do an action on one of the objective points to get the point, then suddenly that's taken a big hit to your offense, which is why that native attack dice or cannons is hugely important for having effective, consistent offense. That said, missiles and torpedoes and secondary weapons can really bump your offense up. So it's not just you aren't sacrificing damage, instead your whole purpose is bringing bigger guns. And so an example for that would be, instead of having the consistent synced laser cannon on Dirge, take my personal favorite, instead switch to proton cannons. Now proton cannons are a little iffy because they don't shoot in your full front arc. So you're now losing that 3-die base gun for the upside of having a 4-dice attack that has a crit modification that will automatically change one of your eyeballs to eyeball or a hit to a crit. So if you get an eyeball, you guarantee that that's going to land some damage, and can do additional crits, especially if you throw in another upgrade like marksmanship. And now we are going high risk, high reward here. So what we've done is we're using less points, so we have a lot more points to play with on Dirge and can put more upgrades on him. And we have a weapon that does considerably more damage than the gun we had before. And the reason I say considerably more is because when you're shooting a 3-die gun, a lot of the things you're shooting at are going to roll 3 green dice. So your offense might be neutered completely by the 3 evade dice, whereas nothing in the game has a native 4 green dice, and a lot of cases they have dramatically less. So if you're throwing this at a ship with 2 evade or 1 evade, or none, if it's a VCX or a decimator, then you're going to land more hits. And that is just the ability to either punch damage through to high evade things or sink a bunch of extra damage into the tougher stuff can really make or break a fight. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to be sure to highlight that, is while the standard best practice is just to have a native 3-die gun, you can risk some upgrades like this one that will give you a situationally more powerful gun that may actually make or break the game. So there's that, and then let's take a look at some other things too. So we talked about shaving the points around and going ahead and kind of adjusting what you have, so you take your baseline and then you can kind of accelerate it. What if we change one of these guys to a 2? Let's say we take out CAD, we throw in a 2-pointer, throw in Bosk, he's our native 2-pointer. Suddenly we have 2 more points to play with, so we can make one of these 3s a 5. We could make this 4 another 6, so instead of Dirge, I could throw in a YV. And I wanted to highlight that because whenever you're putting together your 5 ships, you want to look at all the individual pieces of them, or 5 or 4, or however many you want to take. You want to look at all the individual pieces and say, like, what else could I do with this? Sometimes you want to go ahead and run the fun stuff. Sometimes you want to go ahead and bring something a little bit bigger. Sometimes you just want lots of bodies on the board, or there are ships you just want to fly. These are all totally legitimate reasons to take this stuff. But if you're doing something like that, it's important to look at the fundamentals: attack dice, number of ships, objective control, board control, and think about, if you're going to give yourself a handicap or take something that's a little bit less meta, less competitive, you should understand what you're giving up so that you are aware of what you have to compensate for, if that makes sense. So let's go ahead and also look at, this is a little bit of kind of a points play around where I was looking at the different combination of points to get to 20 in the 5-point ship count. Of course, I did mention some ways you could go up. Like if I change this guy back to a 4, or if I change this guy to a 3, I could throw in an additional 3-point ship. If I change both of these to 3s, I could add 2 more 3-point ships, and suddenly I'm sitting on a, what is that, a 7-ship list? Yeah. So you can easily go up to 7 from here as well. Now you do lose a bit on offense and defense and your abilities, but the extra body can be worth it, and you can kit out a lot of those ships to do extra damage. So this is all how you could build your own list. What if you don't want to build your own list? There are a couple solutions for that. That is that one. And the things I really wanted to cover here, so there are a couple options for that. What I'm looking at right now is rollbetter, rollbetter.gg, all rollbetter, all one word, .gg. That's one of the more common websites where tournaments will use this to organize the tournament, with the added benefit that it also means that tournament lists are listed here. So this is the World Championship that happened back in March, excuse me, I always mix those two up, March 22nd. This is the top players in the world and what they ran to beat all of the other top players in the world. You're looking at our top 10 in the front here. Yeah. So if you don't want to build your own list, right? If you have all the ships, you want to be like, what's good? Just show me what's good. Let me play it. You can go to Roll Better. You can look up an individual tournament and see what did well and say like, oh, I like that. That looks like fun. Okay. That's called net listing. A lot of people do it. No shame in that at all. I personally love tinkering with lists, but I understand that that's extra kind of mental and emotional energy, and you end up losing a lot more. But that's kind of the way I play. So anyway, this is a really good way to kind of check and see what is meta at the given moment and see what you want to do fits within that. And I wanted to take a quick glance at the top 10 and see if, like, look at the ship counts here. And now I did want to mention that everything I've talked about now is kind of a general tips, general points. In any given meta, there are always going to be some nails that stick up a little higher than the others and are a little bit overpowered. At the moment, some of the sort of common consensus overpowered pieces are the Arc 170 starfighters in Republic, the Galactic Republic arcs, especially those from the Siege of Coruscant. So the quick build, not quick build, standardized loadout. I believe it's standardized loadout. Yeah. Standardized loadout cards, the larger scale tarot cards, have some really strong abilities for very cheap. So the arcs stand out as kind of an overly efficient ship, and so you're going to see them a lot. In fact, you see them in 3 of the top 5 lists, including the World Championship was between 2 of these guys with the 3 arcs. But some other fundamentals here. These are 6 ship lists. So they have above the normal ship count, and they also have the arcs, which have a lot of offense and a lot of defense in the form of hit points. They can take a lot of hits. And then they also just have a lot of board control because they're medium base. So that checks off a lot of our boxes, right? So it's a high ship count, very durable, but also every single ship in this list has some form of attack. The Z95 there only has 2 attack dice, and I believe the Y-Wings both have ordnance, either bombs or missiles or turrets, that gives them a little bit of better offense. Because another thing to think about is that if you have a wide arc or a turret, or a front and back arc, then yes, you may throw fewer dice, but if you throw them more often, that can translate to more offense over the course of a game. Because with these Y-Wings, they've got front arc and a side arc or a rear arc with the turrets. So they can cover more of the board, so there are a lot fewer chances they will be without a shot. So getting shots, throwing more dice is an effective way to beat your opponent. So I wanted to go ahead and highlight that. A couple other kind of over-efficiency pieces pop up here and there, but that's something to watch for in the current meta and who's playing what. It doesn't disrupt kind of the fundamentals of the game. Another piece that's kind of sticking up a little bit is your B-Wings, your pair of B-Wings from the Battle Over Endor card pack, also standard loadouts, but it's not always the case that standard loadouts disrupting things. Just at the moment, there's a lot of that. Wanted to highlight this one though, 5-ship list. 5-ship list. All small base, so it actually has a disadvantage on some missions because there's no medium bases on there, but it trades that for having the speed and durability of A-Wings, who again have less offense. They only throw 2 red dice, but they're really, really, really good at covering the board, getting to objectives, grabbing the objectives, and not dying. So if you're not losing the ships, that's protecting your points. If they're effectively dealing with objectives and board control, that's gaining you more points. So you're preventing your opponent from getting points and gaining points yourself. Super effective. And that is, I believe, Wedge. That might be Luke. Let's look at this. It's Wedge, yeah. So Wedge and the 2 B-Wings from the Battle Over Endor really do a great job of dishing out damage, which allows your 2 objective runners to really run around and cause havoc and gain you some extra points that you're not losing otherwise. So what you're going to see here a lot is a really balanced piece between offense, defense, and objectives. So you've got high defense in the A-Wings, got a decent defense in the B-Wings in the volume of hit points, and then they also have defensive reroll. And then, of course, Wedge is an X-Wing mostly there for offense, but that one has an extra shield because he sacrifices a lot of the customization for a short-range offense and the extra shield and defensive ability. So now let's go ahead and go back to the list real quick. I wanted to take a quick peek at a lot of these. You're seeing a lot of, and so let's just discount the Republic right now because we already talked about some of the outliers there that make them a little bit ahead of the power curve. And that's something you're going to have to be aware of and watch for. If you're playing at the kitchen table, you're probably not going to play against the top meta lists, but it still is kind of important to be aware of them. So against these, you could bring a 7-ship list, or you could bring an 8-ship list if you really want to, and see if that works better. Or you could bring a smaller list specifically designed to wreck these guys. Yeah, so those are kind of the different strategies you can take too. I did want to highlight this one because that's a 4-ship list, and that's fairly rare to be below the 5, and 4-point lists do struggle with board control and objectives versus others. If you're going lower ship count, you're going for very high quality ships, at least a couple of them, and hoping that your offense will make up for your lack of objective control. And these ones are again fairly high risk, high reward because each ship you lose hurts more and reduces your chances even further because you're already starting at a disadvantage because you don't have enough ships to contest all of the objectives. And that's going to be mission by mission, but whatever. Then we got another Empire list here that's got 5. We got 4 again in Empire. Ooh, very nice. And we've got a 5-ship Republic, or Resistance, excuse me. 5-ship Rebel. And so you're seeing a fairly consistent 5 ships, 5 ships, 5 ships. There are only a handful of 4 ships and 0 3 ships. Just kind of highlighting the importance of that ship count. That's both because of the meta, but largely because of objectives and scenarios. And these 4 ships are very unusual, kind of odd ducks that really stand out. I've talked about several of these individually. Won't go into that in too much detail because we're talking mostly about kind of the broad strokes. Now I wanted to compare this a bit to the bottom ships, or the bottom lists. And I don't want to pick on anyone, but I do want to look at the list and see if there's something there that stands out as kind of a consistent issue. And it doesn't really. So we got 5 ships, 5 ships, 4 ships, but similar one to what we've seen in the top as well. 5 ships, 5 ships, 5 ships, 5 ships. So you're seeing very, very standard that you want 5 ships. You just want 5 ships in your list. Oh, there's a 4. Unless the few ships you take are such high quality that it's worth it, that you wouldn't shave off some others and go with 7. Excuse me, 6 or 7. Oh, there's some cool lists back here, though. I love this one. That's 2 TIE Interceptors. Ooh. Ooh. That's a cool one. Double Falcon, no fun, but does struggle on objectives. And if you lose, and if you go with 4, again, especially if 2 of them are very expensive, like you have 2 7-pointers, then those are, if either of those 7-pointers go down, you've given up 7 points. You've lost such a big chunk of the chassis you have on the board to actually accomplish things, that's really going to hurt. Yeah, but overall you're seeing there are very, very few 3-ship lists, and those 3-ship lists actually did fairly well, but, I mean, for the bottom. So looking at the ships that have just when we're looking at these, there's one list in particular I did want to highlight, and I wanted to call someone out and maybe start a fight. We'll see. And I wanted to call out the Sith Takers, because what they did is they called out one specific separatist list in here, this one right here. And now again, I don't want to call anyone out individually, but if you're looking at the raw fundamentals of the game that we just outlined about the importance of list building, this is a bad list. Hands down. It is 2 below the kind of desired ship count to control all the objectives on the board. Only has 3 ships that have the extra attack dice. And these are all... So it does... So yeah, it's down on 2 of these, but on the third point is, does it have synergy where the ships support each other? No. Are the ships independent enough that they don't need that? Yes. So you've got double shots and force on Django. You've got possible double shots on Zam, plus force as well. So they've got kind of the soft focus action in addition to whatever action they end up taking. And then they have the opportunity to throw bonus attacks. So you're getting a little bit more value out of the low number of ships. But still, if you lose either one of these, the game is over. Just because they're so expensive, you have so few ships, you can't give up any of these for it to lose. Or to win the game. If you lose one of those, you had better have taken out some other stuff first, and it's very unlikely that you will have because you're going to be outnumbered. Let's see here. Where's the win? This is the win-loss. Yeah. 2 wins, 3 losses, which is not bad. And some of the losses were against some of the best, like Nicholas God is the previous world championship, so you can lose that one. But it was outnumbered every single game, usually by at least 2. Being outnumbered by 2 ships is a real bummer, considering how scary those ships can be now. It's totally reasonable to have 5 ships that throw 3 attack dice, which is going to chainsaw through the 2 evade dice on a fire spray very quickly. So I wanted to call this out because this is listed as... So in one of the more recent Sith Takers podcasts, they called this list specifically as the best that the Separatist faction has to offer, which I'm just... No. Separatists are in kind of a funky spot, right? But one of the things you're going to see a lot from all the individual lists you look at is the majority of them are super salad lists, whatever you want to call it. You can call it soup, you can call it salad, either way. The point being that they're a mixture of different elements, and you don't have a ton of repetition. You've got maybe 2 individual chassis, not 3 of the same individual thing. Even these, like SF, FO, FO, Bomber, Bomber, Advanced, Interceptor, TIE Fighter. The thing about these is that they all do kind of mix a little bit of the best of everything. And that is something that Separatists are particularly good at, because Separatists are one of only 2 factions in the entire game that's able to flood the field with 2-point ships. Now, Vultures are bad. They're bad. They only have 2 red dice, they only have 2 green dice, they have 3 hull. They don't have a ton of loadout, but they are unique to the faction in that you can flood the board with them, and for 6 points you can get 3 2-point objective runners that can cause havoc. Every shot they're taking is 1 less shot your other stuff is taking. So that a 3-ship list is the best that Separatists have to offer just blows my mind. So like, Look at this list right here, okay? Take this list already. All you do is you drop one of the fire sprays. I would drop Zam. Drop Zam, and suddenly you have 8 points to play with. You throw in 4 vultures, for example. You could do that. Or you could do 3 vultures, and then you could upgrade Dirge to a 6 point, or a 5 point, excuse me. No, that's right, a 6 point, because you take 6 out of this, you have 2 left. So then you have a 6 point ship, and then you, instead of having a 3 ship list, you have a 5 ship list. And it's gonna be better. A lot of us old hat players look at a fire spray and say, oh, that's good, just because it's a fire spray. And it's still a really good chassis, but we're seeing more ships on the board with more attack dice, and so the penalty of having 2 evade dice is exaggerated by a lot, especially for expensive ships. So a fire spray is in really, really bad shape right now because it is so expensive because of what it can do individually, not necessarily what you can build around it. Django is one of the best fire sprays in the game because he's initiative 6, meaning he has the ultimate like top pilot skill you can get, which makes him really effective, and he has an ability that gives him free rerolls, which is good. But you can't win a game with that alone. You're not going to run the objectives, you're not going to control the board, he's not going to survive long enough to make the big difference. So you put a big fat target on there that people want to shoot, like Django, you fill your backfield with a couple cheap objective running vultures, and then you mix in the middle with some 4-point ships that can really kind of make up the difference, even here. So instead of Zam have 2 4-point ships, split Dirge into 2 vultures, suddenly you have a 6 ship list. You've taken 3, excuse me, that's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah. Suddenly you have a 5 ship list that is a lot more flexible and has a lot more ability to kind of impact the game. Throw in 2 rogues and 2 vultures, or fill the whole thing with 3-point ships. I believe you can take 3-point... You know what, we're going to go ahead and do this. We're going to do it. We're going to get weird. Let's build this. The reason I wanted to call this out is just based, again, I started with the fundamentals of list building, and if you take those fundamentals into mind, which have been true for the entirety of X-Wing, there is no way that that is the best list that Separatists can bring, and I am annoyed that that is where that subject went. If you're still with me, kudos, I appreciate it. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we can do here. So we've got Tri-Fighters, how many do we have? The Colicoids are unlimited. Let's see what we got. And of course, we don't want to do all the Colicoids. But yeah, right here, 5 ship list, and these all have 3 native attack dice. So you've got a 5 ship list, you've got the fire spray, these are all 3 attack, 3 evade. They're squishy, but that's a lot of offense on 3 evade dice, and they're very effective on objectives. They're very fast. They have the network calculations, so you can keep them in pairs, and they can share each other's calculates. Like, there's a lot to offer there, and we can also kind of tinker with this too, because they have a lot of abilities, right? Yeah, this guy just acquires free target locks. Let's do that one. This guy, yeah, you can just spend friendly calculates when you're taking shots. Yes, please, on offense or defense. Let's see. The Fearsome Predators aren't great. The Flak Arfox are 4 and Volandas, but you know what? We're 1 point short, so let's drop this guy. Let's go to Volandas. I like Volandas. He's initiative 5, which is really good on a quick, zippy little ship. He also has the focus action instead of the calculate action, which of course means that he doesn't have calculate and can't share calculates with these guys. So what you do in this is you have... Oh, I don't have aura in here. What are you doing? That's why I have an extra point. Never mind. There we go. Colicoid. Now, I'm not saying that this is a good list. The point I wanted to make, though, is that you shouldn't be running 3 ship lists, and you shouldn't be looking at that and being like, this is the best that this faction can do. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous, because that is on the very basics of how the game is played. It is a bad list. It's just got so many handicaps. Doesn't, like, I already talked about it. Anyway, one thing I also really want to shout out specifically, so I already talked about this too. So let's see, what are... And the other crazy thing to me too is that when you bring these vultures, not only are they 2 points, so if you lose one, who cares, as long as you have the other stuff in there, but they have abilities, and you can run so many of the dang things. And one thing that I think is hugely important about these is they have access to Discord missiles. And there is nothing in the game that wants to see Discord missiles. Discord missiles just do critical damage on you as long as they're attached to you, and you can't not take the hit. It's system phase, just like, boop, there you go. Get bombed, get proton bombed every single turn. And those ships have to do something to get rid of that. Now you have to spend a calculate to use it, but these things, like, all right, let's look at some of the abilities. These are the Horchals. just get free target locks, or they get free actions. They can either get a free calculate or a free target lock. And there are two different versions of those. You've got the Kelrotos. I like the Kelrotos, but we won't go into that. You've got the base drones. You've got one that will help heal itself or heal others. It's going to die too quickly, but still. You just have so many different options you can do here. But the single big thing about it is they're 2-point ships that no one wants to waste time shooting at. So you fill your list with scary, dangerous stuff, and then you backfill it with 3 of these guys. I wouldn't necessarily take Django because Django is very limiting in how you build. But if you're going to take a fire spray, being able to take it in a faction that has basically unlimited 2-point ships is probably a good idea. So, yeah, Separatist list builders, take another look. That is not your best list out there. Yeah, maybe you just like running fire sprays. Maybe you just like running 2 fire sprays. Maybe the bonus attacks idea seem to make sense, but you're just losing too much to the core fundamentals of the list to have that actually be the way to go. My 2 cents. Anyway, where were we? There we go, 5, yeah. So, yeah, don't do that. And if we look at the, let's just go ahead and actually take a quick look. I believe we can look by faction. Now, I know we can filter this. Yes. Perfect. Look at that. Someone called out one of my other videos in that you can't, that I just went through the entire list, but this is the Separatist faction. And just look at the things you can do, right? Now, these didn't have a particularly high winning record. With the best one, I will say this was the highest win-loss record. But what that tells me, there's something to Separatists, something to Carol's play that does have a chance. Going 6-4 is very good at Worlds. So that's a really good record. There's something here. I don't think that list is it. I think that this was... There could have been something better there. And looking at these, you get a lot of crazy stuff, but yeah, similar vein. So we got a 2 and 3 with the exact same list. And actually, I think that I was looking at Caddy Bree. I wasn't looking at the better performer of them. Yeah, and I'm just, the wheels are turning right here. So I just saw another list the other day. Let me go ahead and pull this one up too. That was brought up in the Gold Squadron Discord. That was another thing you can do with Separatists that focuses just on making the Separatist list very durable. And because Separatists are so cheap, it ends up being with a lot of ships too. So let's pull this up. The Separatist chat is fairly quiet, so it shouldn't take long to get there. Separatists. We're going to call it IB Spiffy. Spiffy with 1 F on Discord here. And you've got 2 HMPs, 2 rogues, and then a gauntlet. It's a 5-ship list with an enormous amount of defense. That's just a huge amount of shields and hull. Got plenty of things to do the objectives. You've got Pre-Vizsla, who has free attack mods, if I'm not mistaken. Let's go ahead and build this one too. Let's take a look at this, because we're building lists. Why not? Yeah. All right, first we got the HMP. We got 2 HMPs, 2 HMPs. A lot of players call these Roombas, and we have DGS 047. 047 is the one I have selected. And then we have DGS 286, also the one I have selected. They're 3 points. Look at the hull on that thing. 5-3. They've got the stats of a B-Wing for 3 points. Now their attack sucks, but yeah. They've got the wide arc and great maneuverability, so they have great time on target. And they have passive rerolls, which they're really good and underutilized, especially at 3 points. Then we've got rogues, and also the rogues are really good. They're the workhorses of Scum right now, and they can be the workhorses of Separatists as well, but they don't get as much attention here. We've got Dirge and Cad, of course, the I-4 and the I-5, and this Cad, shout out to Cad, guess what Separatist Cad gets? During the engagement phase, after another ship at range 0 to 3 is destroyed, you may spend 1 charge to perform an action, even while stressed. If you're getting your vultures popped, this 4-point ship is getting additional actions. Load that sucker up, throw in your vultures, and get some extra attacks. Or get some extra mods, extra motions, extra objectives, whatever. Really good. And then last up, we're still sitting on 16 points. So I could throw in another 2 vultures and just call it a day. Which would make that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ship list. Or, let's just chonk it up. We can throw in the gauntlet. We got Pre-Vizsla. Pre-Vizsla reads, when you perform an attack, if the defender's initiative is equal to or greater than yours, which is very common because he's initiative 3, you may spend 2 charges to roll 1 additional attack die. So you can do that every other turn. You've got a gauntlet that throws 4 attack dice. And when we're talking about kind of the attack dice you put in these lists, this is a great example of how you can kind of cheese that a bit, where both of these guys can have additional attack dice with the synced cannon, or the same thing I did before with the proton cannons, and then he can have a synced cannon. Proton cannons are better the higher initiative you are, because you're more able to line up shots, because the things you're pointing at are more likely to be where they're going to be at the end of movement, because ships move and then shoot. So if you're at high initiative 5 or 6, you have a much better chance of lining up bullseye shots. So this is kind of a typical way to go about this for CAD and Dirge, where you give CAD the more reliable hit gun, and you give Dirge the more reliable high damage gun. So yeah, now you've got a 4-die attack, you've got a 4-die attack, you've got a 3-die attack with bonus actions, and then you've got 2 HMPs, both of whom do some support stuff, yeah. DGS 047 is just, after you perform an attack, if the defender's in your forward arc, you may require a lock on it. Then if it's in your eyeball, you just give it a strain. Not great because it's initiative 1, but it does have to clear that strain in the following turn, so. And then 027 is you may choose another friendly ship at range 0 to 1. That ship transfers a calculate token to you. So you can charge him with other ships nearby. Very good running with a relay and with other vultures. So that's a way you can easily, comfortably pass around a bunch of calculates. Already talked about the others too, but like this list, I think is better than any of the lists that I saw run in the Worlds tournament. I'm going to call you out. Bring it on. Jumping around, yeah. Because these guys really leaned on some interesting. This actually is pretty much just called that. So instead of the gauntlet, you have 3 vultures. There is potential there. It is challenging to fly. It is challenging to build, but there's definitely more there, I think, than is being considered. I don't know if it's play or what, but there is more here. I really don't think any kind of 3-ship list is the best that any faction can do. That's it. Anyway, I'll go ahead and call it there. This has gotten a little bit long, and I've gotten a little bit obnoxious. But long story short, those are the fundamentals of how to build an effective list. We talked a little bit about hammering out some individual lists, focused on a single faction to see a couple different ways you could play with that faction's pieces. All of that is kind of critical to understanding list building in X-Wing as a game. Hopefully this was helpful. I know I've got a fair number of new players who are in the audience here. Please do let me know if you have any questions at all. I do kind of want to put together some questions to do a Q&A. I may go ahead and do that soon. We'll see. Anyway, cheers. See you out there.